Today we are going to look at the ZWO AM5 mount together with the carbon tripod option that they provide with the mount. Recently I received this little box there with a tripod in, and I also received this box there. So the boxes you can see are pretty small, and that second box contained another box inside a traveling case that does look pretty good. Inside the traveling case, there used to be a mount. It's no longer there because I was too impatient and I already set it up. But besides the mount were some Allen wrenches and a USB cable. The mount also came with a periodic error report across a 24-hour period rather than just a few minutes, as would be usual for mounts that I've used up to now. And most importantly, the mount didn't come with any counterweights, and that's because most of the time it doesn't need any counterweight. Heck, the mount didn't even come with a counterweight shaft, which is an option on this mount. Okay, so we're talking indeed about the ZWO AM5 mount. And here is the mount in all its glory, not quite mounted on the tripod because the tripod has a quick release plate for the mount, with this plate that is now screwed on with 3 hex screws on it. So it all comes with the equipment, so it's very easy to just like switch the mount or remove it and transport it independently from the tripod, which can be quite important and quite interesting. Now, my first impressions of the mount is that it's a beautiful piece of kit. ZWO sure knows how to design equipment that looks good and that you just want to use because it is beautiful. This mount is a strain wave gear or harmonic drive mount, meaning it doesn't need counterweights. The technology it uses to drive the axis is different than the worm gear technology that's in the astrophotography community we've been using for years or decades. And because of that, the mount can be small, not super light either, but it's definitely transportable, and it's easy to just set up and carry around. Let's put it on the tripod. So I can put it on the tripod. What is nice with this mount is I can just like swivel it so that I'll have like the north pointing direction of the mount be over one of the tripod legs that we have here. And there is a locking mechanism here that I can use to lock it in place. And there is also a tiny little tripod spreader that also fixes the mount in place. So for this video, what I want to do is walk you through my first usage, my first light of the mount, including many of the frustrations that I might experience. I don't know yet. So it is not going to be a full review, but really the impressions after the first night and how easy it is to get to grips with when you first receive it. I also want to provide a quick overview of what an astrophotography mount is and what we should be looking for in such a mount for any of you guys who may be beginners in astrophotography. I'll put chapters down below so that the most experienced among you can just like skip this section. So first things first, this is an astrophotography mount. You will put your telescope on top of the mount here in the saddle that can be closed down on the telescope dovetail. This mount can be used both as an alt-azimuth mount or as an equatorial mount. Right now it is in an equatorial configuration. In an alt-az configuration, it will only be moving horizontally and vertically. This is great for visual because it's very intuitive to use. So if you want to use a telescope with eyepiece to actually look at the stars and nebulae and whatever, it's really good to use in alt-az mode. However, for me, I'll be focusing on astrophotography because this is where my passion lies. And for astrophotography, you want to set it in an equatorial mode where the mount actually points towards the celestial pole. So for me, it's the north celestial pole, so that the mount itself has one of its axes parallel to the axis of rotation of the Earth. That way I can use a single axis to counteract the Earth's rotation while we take pictures of stars at night, as the stars effectively stream across the sky throughout the night. So there are some important factors to consider when we get a mount. some of the most important factor will be how easy it is to polar align, because I need to be able to go do some very fine adjustments so I can really get the mount RA axis, what we call the right ascension axis, parallel to the Earth's rotation axis. That's one thing. And another thing, when you're thinking about the astrophotography, you need to be extremely precise in how you track the stars. And for that, we use very often a technique called auto-guiding, where we have a secondary small telescope and small camera that tracks a star independently from the main camera and basically has a feedback loop to the mount to tell it to like go back this direction or go to another direction, so that the mount is always tracking extremely precisely. So how well the mount can be guided is also an extremely important factor. There are some mounts that don't need to be guided. This is not one of those. Another important factor of mounts for astrophotography is how much weight you can put on it, how much scope you can actually mount on it, because the bigger and the heavier the scope is, as well as the further away it is from the axis of rotation, it will affect the performance of the mount. And the weight of the mount to the payload that it can carry, that ratio, can also be very important. And strain wave gear mounts like this one exceed at that. This mount, the mount head, weighs 5 kilograms, but it can carry a payload of 13 kilograms of scope without any counterweight. And with counterweights, it could carry up to 20 kilograms. That is a very, very respectable carry capacity. Now, to test all of those with a mount, I'll be testing out how precise I can get my polar alignment to. So we'll use some software to actually do the polar alignment. It will tell us how far away we are from perfect polar alignment. The distance from perfect polar alignment is measured in angles, in actual degrees. If I pointed the mount in this direction, but the celestial pole is lying in that direction, then the angle that I have between my two hands there is effectively the angular distance between where the mount is pointing and where the celestial pole is, so where the mount should be pointing. And so we want to get that difference as small as possible. And for that, I'll be using language such as arc degrees or arc minutes, 60 arc minutes in a degree, and arc seconds, 60 arc seconds in an arc minute. Typically, if we're within a couple or even 5 or 6 arc minutes of the celestial pole, we are perfectly fine for imaging that uses the auto-guiding methodology. And talking about auto-guiding is, as I was mentioning, a feedback loop to really make sure that the mount stays on target. It's absolutely necessary because the mechanics of the mount are not quite precise enough to do this perfect tracking on its own. It needs the help of an auto-guider. And with auto-guiding, one of the figures that I'll be looking at is called the RMS, our root mean square. And it is effectively the average deviation of the mount from ideal guiding. It is affected by a lot of factors, such as even the atmospheric conditions, and how precise you need your root mean square figure to be actually depends on the resolution of your equipment, how much you zoom in onto your targets, and how small the pixels on the camera that you are using are. So it gets a bit complex. But in general, for most amateur astrophotography equipment, a guiding of less than 1 arc seconds is good enough. And so you'll see me probably using figures of like 1 arc second, 0.9, 0.7, whatever, depending on the test results that I get on this mount. So that's it for beginners on a quick introduction to mounts, so you know what I'll be talking about for the rest of this review. Let's keep going. Yeah, let's have a quick look at the mount itself. So at the back of the mount here, we can see effectively the wedge of the mount that allows me to align the mount to be parallel to the Earth's rotation axis. To align it, we have 2 axes, a horizontal and a vertical axis here. And the horizontal one, you have locking nuts like that on each side of the mount. And you can maybe like slightly tighten them before you can do adjustments, very fine adjustments with those screws on the side to move the mount left and right, or east and west as it were. And we have a very similar system for the altitude of the mount, where I can lock and unlock on each side of the mount like this, and use this screw here to move the mount around. And it is extremely smooth and very, very easy to do. So this is a good sign for the polar alignment. The mounting plate has support for both Vixen side dovetails and larger Losmandy ones. And again, extremely smooth, very easy to move around. The mount really gives a premium feel overall. At the front, we have the ports to control the mount. We have the power input with 12 volt, 5 amps. We have the slot for the hand controller. We have an auto guide slot, which I will never be using, and neither should you. This is a slot for ST4 cables. It's an old way of guiding, and I wouldn't recommend using them. It's always better to directly control the mount via USB, including for guide commands. And talking about USB, this is where we can connect the mount to a computer to make use of it. And we have on the side here a through the mount power output. So we can get a cable and put it to the telescope so that for cooled cameras and for autofocusers, etc., we can provide power. On the side of the tripod itself, as I mentioned earlier, we have this little plastic spreader, which is always nice. And at the bottom, we also have this kind of bag here where you could put counterweights or bags of sand or heavy stuff, so you can really bring the center of gravity of the whole equipment downwards, which is always nice. And finally, we have the remote control of the telescope, which is kind of like a joystick. It's very unusual, and it would be most useful for visual astronomy. And I personally probably will almost never use it, but will still have a go. Once the mount is turned on, you can actually use the Wi-Fi connectivity of the joystick to connect to it via a smartphone or even a computer. You can also program the controller to actually connect to your house Wi-Fi, which is what I did, and that helps the mount actually download any firmware updates it needs over Wi-Fi, which is pretty cool. I have now connected the mount to power using this mobile battery that I got cheap off of Amazon, and the power button here is on the side. I can just push it in to provide power to the mount, the controller, and the Wi-Fi. Let's see how well it works in practice. With the mount on and the controller connected to it, I'm actually able to connect via Wi-Fi to the mount using the ASI mount application on the App Store. So I'll be using that on my phone. So really what I saw is the easiest is to simply go to your Wi-Fi settings and select the AMH or whatever is written on the back controller. Once you do, you will connect to it. And once that's done, you can actually connect to the mount via the ASI mount app. So let me launch the ASI mount app. Here it tells me about locations. I am just going to ignore that for now. And I can click on the mount icon and you can see it's already been connected via the Wi-Fi. I didn't have to do anything as long as you're connected to the Wi-Fi. So this is pretty good, and the app is pretty neat. So what happens if I click somewhere and I say go to? Immediately it's slows. It's very quiet and it's very fast as well. So that's pretty cool. Okay, I want to do one more because it's fun. Go to. Sorry, I'm having useless fun right now. It's confidence inspiring to see the mount moving so well like that. In the mount menu as well, you have the option to go home, and the mount apparently has some home sensors, so it knows exactly where the home position is, and apparently it can find it like flawless. And in those settings, there's this AMH management system that lets me configure the mount to connect to my own Wi-Fi router so that I can connect the mount anytime whenever I am on the Wi-Fi of the mount. And I can also go and check if there is any new version to the firmware. So it's very easy. I'm like on the tech side of things. I'm quite impressed by the mount. You can tell ZW has had practice with the equipment that they've done, the ASI Air, in building good apps. And the mount seems to be quite easy to use, even just from the smartphone. And I can also use the joystick to completely control the mount as I like. So from a technical standpoint, it seems to be quite good. So what I'll do before I can test the mount for the first light, it's not going to be tonight, it's probably going to be tomorrow night, is I'll be installing the ASCOM drivers from ZW on my mini PC that I use for astrophotography. But I unfortunately won't really have the time to mount the scope on it or anything like that, so I'll do it together with you. This is because of my busy full-time job. And if you ever want me, by the way, to go full-time on YouTube for even more better videos, you may want to go and support me on Patreon or join the channel as a member, or simply enough just liking the video, leaving a comment down below, subscribing to the channel. It helps the channel a lot, and it helps make the YouTube algorithm that my videos do hold some interest for a couple of you guys. So thank you so much in advance. Anyway, my first impressions of the mount, just like playing with it, is really good. It feels like a premium mount in a very small package. Tech-wise, it looks really nice with the app. All of the dials, all of the screws and bolts and nuts to adjust the mount seem to be very smooth. So I'll see how well they actually work under the night sky. And the whole control system, like everything about this mount, is beautiful. I'm honestly quite impressed. It feels almost like, it reminds me of Vixen mounts, which if you know my channel, I really like, because they're just like plug and play. You never need to tinker with them. And for now, this reminds me of that. So that's a very, very good sign. That said, the proof is really in the pudding. I will have to use the mount under the stars because the most important aspect will be how well it can track the stars for long exposure astrophotography. So once I get a clear night, I'll bring you together and let's go there through the magic of editing. It's the evening, we're outside, and unfortunately it's clear outside. I'm saying unfortunately because I haven't had the time to actually mount my scope on the AM5 and to actually test that it's working during the day. So I am opening myself to frustration, and I am not following my own advice, which is test a new mount as much as possible during the daytime so that you don't get frustrated at night. Fortunately, this night has a redeeming quality. It's almost the full moon, so I'm not going to be doing any serious imaging anyway, and I'll be able to spend some time like checking how easy it is to polar align the mount, how well it guides, and really that's all I care about, because since I'm really looking at this mount from an astrophotography point of view, I'm assuming that most people for that purpose will be using it either with the ASI Air or with a mini computer like I am with Nina, for instance. Meaning that even if like things like Goto are not super accurate, because we're doing plate solving, it doesn't really matter. Plate solving will fix any inaccurate Gotos. That said, if I will be able to see the initial alignment errors, that kind of stuff, while we play around with this beautiful little mount. So let's see if my first impressions of the mount will be confirmed under the stars. The first step will be to remove my scope here from my SEM60 Ioptron mount that I really love and enjoy. Fortunately, the Ioptron has through the mount cabling, so this telescope is linked to the mount via only one power cable, and everything else is, as far as I remember, self-contained. So it should be as easy for me as removing one cable and just switching to the AM5 that's back there. Let's do it. And of course, I was wrong. I had not only one power cable to the mount, but also a cable to control the mount itself. Pretty important. Here we are. Ah, doesn't it look awesome? I gotta say, ZWO, they know how to make beautiful looking equipment. It reminds me of Meade back in the day. I just could not resist the Meade telescopes. They were too beautiful, and it's kind of the same with this little mount. Okay, is it well set? Yes, and I'm not going to care about balancing anything because it's strain wave gear / harmonic drive, so I don't care about balancing stuff. Awesome! So here I have the little power cable that I used on the SEM60, and I'm just going to connect it here. I'll be using the same power connector that I used for my SEM60. This is a 12 volt, 5 amps power connector that is coming for the moment from the outlet, so directly from mains. And I'll want later on, probably in a further video, to test this and the power consumption with things like mobile batteries, but not for tonight. And I'll just connect this to the front of the mount, and in theory that should be enough. And I can confirm my mini computer that's here already has its red LED, meaning that it's off but has power on, so I can actually turn on the mini PC. So even with the AM5 off, it's actually relaying power to the through the mount cabling, which is always a good thing. I'm connected to my remote PC there using my laptop on the table here, and I've noticed that when I plug in the USB port to the mount from the PC, I get this new COM6 that comes up. And I've downloaded and installed the ASCOM driver from the ZWO website. This added this new icon here, and it seems to have pre-selected COM6, which is what we're going to use, and I'm going to say connect. Okay, it looks like it's connected, which is good. Apparently you can do firmware update from there as well, in addition to the actual app, which is pretty cool. So next step will be for me to open Nina, because I want to use the Nina 3-point polar align plugin to do my polar alignment. So in Nina, the first thing that I'll do is I'll connect to the camera. Hopefully there she's in there. It's going to work. And I'm going to cool it down and see if I get enough power through the mount cabling. It should be fine, but just in case. Then we have the filter wheel, which is, it doesn't exist. I don't have a filter wheel. I just tell Nina what filter I have in, so that the files that Nina records has the filter information. So I'm currently having the GNB filter in the filter drawer of the telescope. I'm going to connect my focuser as well. For now, everything seems to have power perfectly fine. So the through the mount cabling is working without issue. And I want to connect the ASI mount and not my SEM60. And yep, seems to be working fine. You know what? I'm just going to use 1 second exposure time for the 3-point polar alignment, but I'm going to check with the default settings what happens. So just click play. And it's slewing, guys, it's slewing. Without any counterweight. It's not the heaviest scope there is, right? But it's without any counterweight. Sorry, I'm a bit excited. I'm really hoping, okay, so I should just relax, quiet down, because it's gonna take exposures now, and I want the plate solving to work. So I'm just gonna relax a little bit, take it easy, wait for the 3-point polar. Oh, it's going to the second point. So it seems to be working quite fine. This is exciting. This is really a beautiful looking toy. I really hope the tracking works well. Okay, we have the second point. We're moving to the third and final point for the polar alignment. And we're done. And I'm actually surprisingly close to polar alignment, which is very, very nice. Okay, so I want to move the mount right. So I am going to untighten. So the azimuth controls are very, very smooth, very easy to turn, which is very nice. And we are getting there, so I'm getting closer and closer with 27 arc minutes difference now. Oh, and we're down to 12 arc seconds. The azimuth controls are really smooth, really easy to do, and really precise. I'm going to close the knots and see whether that affects the azimuth a lot or not. It's always the nuts when you close and you tighten them out that tends to move it around. But it seems to have done a few arc seconds. Okay, and I'm done with my polar alignment. We're at less than 1 arc minute error, so it's perfectly fine. I can confirm the bolts, despite how small the mount is, it's very, very easy to use for polar alignment. And I think it might be some trouble in the middle of winter with gloves on, but with it's still I think for the size of the mount, it's really good, really good, almost exceptional, I would say. Okay, so and we've confirmed that the 3-point polar alignment in Nina, for those who don't use the ASI Air, works perfectly well, which is awesome. Going to go back to the mount options and just say go home, and it goes home. seems to be working beautifully. So my next point is to open PhD2. And what I'll do for now is I'll just start easy. I'm going to salute to M42. And we'll see like how close it is. I mean, it has almost perfect polar alignment and it has a home position sensor. So in theory, the Goto should be quite accurate as long as the telescope doesn't bump me. It doesn't. Okay, let's first take an image in Nina, see how it looks like. Oh wow, that is impressive. M42 is in the field of view. I haven't aligned the mount besides the polar alignment, and it's already almost dead center, so, and probably the error is just my cone error on the telescope. This is really, really impressive. Like I'm really impressed. Okay, so before I do anything, I want to try in the mount to see, yes, we do have a guide rate. Okay, so the guide rate in here seems to be 0.5 of sidereal. Typically I put it to 1 or 0.9 in EQ mode, but you know, I'll try it with the default and see what happens. But for that, maybe I want to go in the brain of PhD2. First, I want to go inside the guiding tab of PhD2 in the settings, and in the advanced here, I want to use the new calculation of calibration based on a guide speed of 0.5 from the mount as it is right now. We'll see, like, I have no idea what are the best settings for the mount, but for now I'm just using the defaults of both the mount and PhD2. So let's do shift, click, force calibration, yes. Okay, the calibration is over, and let me look in the calibration data. And it seems that overall things have been doing fine. The calibration went okay. And let's look at those guiding results. I'm going to just stay quiet and not move, even go off the balcony for a while to let it run for a few minutes to see what results we obtain in the end. Okay, it's been less than 5 minutes, but I'm too excited to not talk because I can see the guiding is really, really good. Right now we're getting 0.75 arc seconds RMS overall. But what is really beautiful is I don't see huge spikes of guiding anywhere. The RA is quite stable, and also the declination reacts immediately to pulses in opposite direction, which does indicate very low to no backlash, as is expected from a strain wave gear mount. It really is a big change from my previous strain wave gear mount, which was not a good mount, unfortunately. It was defective. So to see that is really amazing. And I just realized that my guiding algorithm was set to predictive PEC, which is not good. We want to use, I believe, hysteresis for this particular mount. Okay, so I think now the best thing to do is just to keep taking exposures on the Orion Nebula. I'm going to put my Antlia narrowband filter on top of the telescope and try to take 10-minute long exposures, because I saw that the guiding with 1 second exposures seems to be pretty good at around 0.75 arc seconds, which is very, very decent, especially in an area of poor seeing like Tokyo. And, you know, I'll see how those 10-minute long exposures turn out. So let's try it. In the end, I am taking something like 10-minute exposures on the Jellyfish Nebula. And you can see that overall the guiding is doing absolutely great, but I do get those spikes there, and they seem to be linked to wind, because anytime I see a spike, I hear the wind blowing outside. And all things considered, with the strength of the wind tonight, it's doing quite well. And I was honestly expecting the mount to perform much worse with regards to wind. So it's really good to see that it is very resistant. And also I haven't put any weight in the pouch that is attached to the tripod, because I completely forgot. And yet, even then, it's still performing pretty well. And if I go and check inside Nina, like the previous 10-minute exposures, so those are 10-minute exposures, the stars are perfectly round. Any non-roundness is just due to collimation, seriously. It's just, I mean, sure, it's only 300mm focal lengths, but it's all that you need with such a super portable mount. At least for me, I'm not going to put like huge telescopes with large focal lengths on it. It's just
it just works. And this is my first light with it. This is my first time. I didn't spend any time really testing the mount. It's the first time I connect it to a computer. It's the first time I use ASCII on it. It's the first time I guide with it. And it just works. I mean, I think you're able to tell, but I am quite impressed. And you can see that once we go past the spikes that were basically done by the wind, we're going back to a total RMS of 0.52 arc seconds. It's like it makes no sense. The mount has no right to be as good as it is, and it's really annoying because now I'm actually consider buying it.
And here we are, following morning, and the telescope and the mount has apparently worked beautifully. It's back on the park position, and now I'll have a look at all of the 10-minute subs that we got. But to tell you the truth, whenever I was looking at one during the evening, it was perfect. So fingers crossed that all of them are like that.
We're the following day, and I'm looking at the guide logs of the previous nights using the AM5. And here are the guide logs, and if I'm looking just at the result, we see an overall result of 0.8 arc seconds, which is pretty good, not exceptional, but pretty good. And as I would expect towards the end here, when the target gets lower on the horizon around 30 degrees, I get worse guiding, which is normal. I see that with any mount, it's due to the seeing getting worse and worse as there is more atmosphere to filter through, and also as we get more into the smog and light pollution of Tokyo. Okay, as expected. And if I were to reject all of the frames and just include some within some typical time frames. So let's say between those two dithers here and between those two dithers, and we can include this as well. And we can basically see the average of all of those kind of like normal guiding periods, and we can see a result of 0.6, which is very good. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's really looking fine. So overall, the mount seems to be guiding very well with the default settings and me not doing anything. There is one obvious exception though, which is in the very middle. And it is this section here where we have two periods where suddenly I have some declination oscillations here going on. And I have absolutely no idea what could have triggered those oscillations. It kind of makes me think that I should be decreasing the declination aggressivity or aggressiveness setting from 100 to maybe half that to start with, and then test again. So I'll do further tests on that, and it is possible that this might have ruined one of my exposures. My exposures are currently being calibrated on my computer, so I'm waiting for that to complete. But we can see that overall the night, at least until the target went down, so several hours of data for something like almost 4 hours of data, everything went very smoothly except this one time here where we can see the declination oscillation, which is a bit weird, quite interesting, and something to investigate some more, and which I will do following this. But really the proof is in the pudding, so I am also going to look at all of the exposures that I took and to see whether there are any that have trailing. I would expect one to have trailing, at least because of this oscillation, and because this trailing happened after a dither and also before a dither very briefly, we might have actually two frames affected. So let's go through the single frames and I'll point out any if they have blemishes. This is the result of a typical frame, and pretty much all of the frames are like this with very round stars, no problem whatsoever. I'm looking at the center of the frame, and I do believe I have found the one frame affected by this declination kind of oscillation. I believe it's this one. There you can see it's kind of like elongated compared to the one prior to it or the one after it. So this is the extent of the issue for my 10-minute exposure. It's only 300 millimeters, so it would have been much worse at a longer focal length. So that would have meant one 10-minute sub thrown away. Not the end of the world, but it's there. And I do feel like I need to test more with different aggression settings for declinations to try and remove those oscillations. Well, fingers crossed, and we'll see how this progresses in the future.
So for now, what are my impressions of this little mount? It's actually very, very positive at this point. The mount itself is small and light, although less small and less light than I was kind of expecting for a strain wave gear mount, but it really more than makes up for it by the really high quality mechanisms to do like polar alignment of the mount, which for a small mount like that, I would expect many people would use traveling, right? So ease of polar alignment is absolutely critical. And also, since for me this is a loaner mount, I don't know if I am going to ask ZW to just let me buy it at the end of my review period. I don't want to leave it on the balcony like I do my normal mount under the rain and stuff. Of course, under a cover, because at least the feet of the tripod would be exposed, that kind of stuff. So that means that every time I want to use this mount during this review period, I'll have to put it back inside and bring it back outside and do this polar alignment again. So I will be feeling the pain more than usual, but it's all for a good cause. I am also pleasantly surprised by the cabling and the through the mount cabling. It really makes everything a breeze to set up, and it's always good to also have a USB port on the mount, which is more and more standard, but it's still better than RS-232 interfaces. And that together with the dovetail mount, that's also very nice, very smooth, and seems to work really excellently. It made like switching to this telescope from my previous mount super easy. So that's a really like just, I mean, you saw the process. It was just a matter of a couple of minutes, which is again super important and super good. Now, the tripod itself, I had heard that it wasn't that great, but for now I don't see any problems or issues with it. It's a nice sturdy tripod with like a quick release plate, which is always nice, and also a little tripod spreader and a way to put weights on near the bottom of the tripod using sand or whatever. And despite not weighing the tripod down for my first light, it still performed admirably, even with some wind. Not like the strongest wind gusts that I can get here, but still pretty significant. So overall, like the whole equipment as a package is really, really nice because it is small, fairly light, definitely transportable, easy to get to set up with the polar alignment, and the scope on the top. You know, it checks all of the boxes for portable astrophotography, which is amazing. And of course, the biggest deal is no counterweights. The thing did not care about the scope that's on there. Of course, it's not a big scope, and I feel like if you're going to use it traveling, you're not going to put big scopes on top of this a lot. Now, I'm really wondering how well it would do with a large scope, but I don't currently own a large scope because during my Astro slump period recently, I sold pretty much all of my stuff, including my big Newtonian. So testing it with a large scope will have to wait for now. But as you saw, the only thing that had me worry a little bit was the declination guiding. So we saw those weird oscillations, and it almost felt like, you know, the guide algorithm in PhD2 was pushing the mount to go one direction, and then the mount overshot, and then we repeated that cycle until finally the oscillation stopped. So I'm getting the feeling again that reducing the aggression will do good for that. But if you have any suggestions about how to deal with that, please let me know. It didn't quite ruin any subframe that I took, but it was visible on one of the subframes that I took during last night. So over a period of 4 hours, lost, let's say degraded 10 minutes of imaging. And it would have been much worse with a longer focal length. So that's the one thing that I'm still like, I need to investigate this more, and I can't really say whether this is the perfect mount yet. But yeah, overall, I am quite impressed. So what are your thoughts on this mount? Do you own it? And or if you don't, like after seeing this video, what do you think about it? Please let me know down in the comments. While you're on your way there, you may want to leave a like or dislike on the video, and subscribe if you're not subscribed, and welcome to the channel if that's the case. If you really are feeling generous, you can join my Patreon or join the channel for further help. But really, that's all I wanted to cover in this video, so thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.